What if Doctor Who hadn't been axed in 1989? That is something many have tried to guess at, and now it's my turn. I'll be going through this concept at the rate of 1 season per episode. These videos are based on information released by John Nathan Turner, Andrew Cartmel, Ben Aaronovitch, and a lot, and I mean a lot, of guesswork.
Season 48 of Doctor Who would have aired between the 20th of August 2011 and the 22nd of October 2011 and would have starred David Suchet, Juliet Landau, DOUGRAY Scott in their second and final series. It would also have been Gary Russell's 5th and final series as producer, as well as Robert Sherman's 3rd and final series as script editor. To spice up this season, an extra companion would have been added, starting in episode 2 as episode 1 concluded the 3-episode arc started in season 47. The new companion would be Gemma Legato, who's from a human colony planet, Rosadine, in the 31st century. Gemma would be played by actress Emma Kenny. This would be the largest TARDIS team featuring 3 companions, since the Griffith years, if you count Susan in season 31, and if you're going by regular TARDIS teams, it's the Davison years. As you'd expect, her name would be added to the TARDIS sequence, which would largely remain the same. Following the season, Doctor Who Endgame, the 4th Doctor Who film, would have been released, originally scheduled for November 2011 release, but pushed back to February 2012. And on top of this, another spin-off called Cold Front would launch in late 2012, following Panopticon Series 5. As this was Gary Russell's last, it ended up being crammed full of continuity references to the show's past, for better or for worse. Every episode has some sort of connection to what had gone before, whether that be returning villains, characters, notable actors, or even music. Chris and Zenla are living their lives peacefully after leaving the Doctor 5 years ago. They are living happily on Earth, or was it Gallifrey? So wait, something strange is going on. Wait, weren't they in the Toymaker's castle? They may not be, but the Doctor is now, and he will hunt them down and find them to his last breath. This story carries on from where both Hark the Weeping Angel Sing left off for the Doctor and the first game left off for Chris and Zenla. Sorta. We open with Chris and Zenla living their lives together in Cambridge. It's all happy and quaint, but then we notice that it's not quite right. For one, Chris has an arm, which he lost in the first game, and they both talk about leaving the Doctor 5 years ago but mention nothing of their most recent adventure. Then all of a sudden, we see that they are actually on Gallifrey. Wait, no. They were in Cambridge and on Gallifrey at the same time. While Chris and Zenla are experiencing the same events, Chris sees it through his eyes that they're on Earth, and Zenla sees it through her eyes that they are on Gallifrey. And yet still, Gallifrey isn't quite right. It's how Zenla remembers it. The Rogue is president for one, Leela is still alive, and Francis is still Christopher Beans. We follow them for about the first half of the episode, discovering what's going on and realising they are seeing different things and that it's all fake. Meanwhile, we follow the Doctor having arrived back in the Toymaker's castle. He firstly sends Doctor Who's TARDIS back to the parallel world on autopilot so Professor Fleming can have it as it's rightfully hers. Then the Doctor spends most of his time in a duologue with the Valeyard, as the others are occupied with dealing with Chris and Zenla. It's here we discovered that the Rogue created him, as he wanted someone with the intellect, intelligence and skills of the Doctor, but without the morality that pitifully lets the Doctor down, so he could deal with his rival Gregory, as the Doctor failed to do in Doctor Who Vengeance. So he created all of those traits from the Doctor mid-regeneration between 12 and 13 and then created the Valeyard. Unfortunately for the Rogue, the Valeyard rebelled and went after the Doctor instead. This would be an intense scene where the Doctor's own morality comes into question and almost becomes a reverse version of the famous The Fourth Doctor and Davros scene from Genesis of the Daleks. Finally, the Doctor manages to work out where Chris and Zenla are, and that they were sent into another dimension like he was, except they were sent into 2 simultaneously at the same time, split across them. The Doctor manages to extract them from the parallel dimensions and bring them back into the Toymaker's castle. It's here that the Doctor sees that Chris has lost his arm, and Chris remembers himself. He feels all the pain and terror as the memories of him losing it come back, and the physical pain that was being suppressed until now. However, before they have much of a chance to do anything else, Chris and Zenna are transported again and miniaturized onto a chessboard. The Toymaker then invites the Doctor to play a game of chess with him, except every single piece on the board is a real person who has been miniaturized, with the King and Queen on the Doctor's half being Chris and Zenna. If the Doctor wins, he, Chris, Zenna and all the other people on that board will be released and allowed to return home. If he loses, everyone on that board, including the Toymaker's half, will die, and the Doctor will be trapped eternally as one of the Toymaker's toys. The game ensues, and the Doctor and the Toymaker picking up the pieces with their hands. The Doctor's doing his best not to crush anyone, and the Toymaker simply doesn't care, crushing people as he goes. The game goes on for about 25 minutes of runtime, and it's really tense. Eventually, however, the Doctor gets the Toymaker in checkmate, and then shortly after wins the game. As the rules of the games are binding, the Doctor, Chris and Zenna are immediately transported back inside the TARDIS and they take off, with the other pieces presumably transported home too. This episode ends with the Doctor giving Chris an alien prosthetic arm, and a running character arc in this season is Chris dealing with learning how to use his arm and also the loss of his old one. Gemma Legato, a human colonist in the 31st century, lives on the planet Rosadine. With the native race, the Archnauts, are enslaved by the humans. All her life, Gemma has been fighting for Archnauts' freedom, and now, 3 strange travellers drop out the sky, and a fight may be, finally, worth something. This episode introduces our new companion, Gemma, to the show, and is set on the human colony world of Rosadine in the 31st century. We see that the humans in Rosadine have enslaved the natives there, the Archnauts, the alien race who were briefly featured in Jubilee, and due to the CGI models already existing, they were brought back. Gemma is a freedom fighter for the Archnauts, and is strongly against enslaving them due to the fact that she thinks slavery over any living thing is wrong, and also because it was their planet and the humans invaded. The Doctor, Zen and Chris land on Rosadine and they meet Gemma, and in old fashion the Doctor helps the rebel story ensues. However, another, more sci-fi subplot is also introduced. There's an old hermit woman, played by Maureen O'Brien, who lives on top of a mountain, who runs a secret sanctuary for escaped Archnauts. Gemma often helps Archnauts get there, and the hermit was very much her mentor. However, we find out she's actually marooned on Rosadine after a dimension skipping here 40 years ago, and therefore her timeline fell out of sync and split into 2. She decided to dedicate her life to helping the Archnauts after she realised she couldn't get back home. After they abolish Archnaut slavery, the Doctor and co manage to help the hermit merge with her own timeline and send her back home. However, as she leaves, the Doctor asks her name, and she replies simply with Vicky, and then she vanishes, merging back with her other self. The camera holds on the Doctor's face as a single tear falls down his cheek. Then we move on. The Doctor invites Gemma to join him in the TARDIS, and Gemma says yes. And then the TARDIS takes off for their next adventure. The hermit woman, who will not be confirmed by Russell and Sherman as our Vicky, but should simply be left to the audience's imagination. However, the assertion is certainly made that it is our Vicky, as she's played by Maureen O'Brien. However, to the casual viewers, it would just seem that she was just a new character, especially as the Doctor didn't realise that it would be our Vicky to the very end. Roll up to the great Viennese exposition, where Sherman Stahlbaum will show you his most wonderful creation, the Silver Turk, a mechanical marvel that will not only play for you the forte piano, the spinet, and the flute, it would also pay you at the gaming table too. But when the Doctor brings Chris, Zen and the new companion Gemma to 19th century Vienna, he soon identifies the incredible Turk as one of his deadliest enemies, a parts machine, Cyberman. And that's not even the worst of the horrors at large in the city. This episode is Gemma's first trip in the TARDIS to, for her, ancient history, as the TARDIS lands in 1873, Vienna, and it's based upon the real-life case of the Turk, who in this story turns out to be a Cyberman, and not just any old Cyberman, but one of the original Mondashian versions. This story would be considered one of the best of David Suchet's era, and would really focus on the horror of the Cybermen. It would also be filmed on location in Vienna and the surrounding area, as well as Cardiff, doubling in some cases. James Smythe finds out his life is turned upside down when he comes home to find his beloved wife strangled in the night. He turns to a private investigator, only known as the Doctor, to help find her murderer. However, the police force run their own investigation and Smythe is their prime suspect. While Smythe is in prison, the Doctor and his companions must find the real murderer and prove James Smythe innocent. This story would be a homage to the film noir genre and show the Doctor and his companions taking the roles of detectives in the 1940s. This episode would be notable for not only featuring a return to the 1963 Howler Untitled sequence, albeit slightly altered, but also being presented entirely in black and white. As all of the 60s episodes were colorised, it would make this episode the only episode of Doctor Who to be in black and white. However, due to fan outrage, a special feature on the DVD and Blu-ray would have been a colour version. The TARDIS lands on the planet Pixos, the place to go for all things gaming, whether it be from the earliest arcade cabinets or the newest virtual reality suites. The Doctor and his travelling companions test out the newest development in VR. The Doctor and his companions decide to relive some of his old adventures as they start to have a lot of fun finding out about the Doctor's past. However, it's not all fun and games, as there seems to have been a game-breaking glitch. This episode would be dubbed the Gary Russell episode because of the fact that it's the only story to be written, directed and produced by the same person. Planet of the Spiders comes close, but Barry Letts used a pseudonym. And the fact that its production code was 48G. It was also dubbed The Name Shakespeare William Shakespeare Done Right. We'd see the Doctor, Zenla, Chris and Gemma go to a gaming planet where they'd enter a VR simulation and relive some of the Doctor's old past adventures. There'll be 4 main stories featured throughout the episode that they've relived. They are, in this order, the ARK in Space, Marco Polo, Snake Dance and Night Force. However, we'd have a montage sequence featuring clips from The Fury of the Deep, The Time Warrior, Vengeance on Varos, The Greatest Show of the Galaxy, A Case of the Blue Box, Illusions of Life, The Battle of the Strong, and You Can Only Time Travel Twice. It would appear in this montage that they are enjoying themselves and having a good time. It isn't till about halfway through the episode, towards the end of their time in Marco Polo, that stuff starts to go weird. There are strange glitches and distortions, and characters in the game start to act strangely and differently to what the Doctor remembers, and their lives start to be threatened. They try to leave, but only Gemma leaves, leaving the rest of them trapped there. We follow 2 plots from here on: the Doctor, Zen and Chris inside the simulation, and Gemma on the outside. Gemma tries to find out what's going on, and she works with the people in charge to help the Doctor and co. get out. However, there's a virus in the game, and as they experience Snake Dance and Night Force, their lives are truly in danger. Eventually, Gemma manages to reboot the simulation and get them out. This episode would be achieved through recreations of costumes, sets and characters from the original stories. The Doctor, Chris, Senna and Gemma taking on the roles of previous Doctors and companions, such as 13 in 4's costume playing 4, Zenna in Sarah Jane's costume playing Sarah Jane, and Chris in Harry's playing Harry's. Or the same with 8, Katie and Henrik, for example. Sets would be recreated and the supporting characters would be handled in 2 ways. For the missing episodes, new actors who look somewhat similar to their original counterparts would have been used, and for surviving episodes, most characters, unless this wasn't possible for some reason, would have been archived footage rotoscoped into the scenes with a special effect on it to make it look more like they were actually there. While travelling in the TARDIS, the Doctor hears a knock on the door. Bewildered and no doubt curious, he answers, only to be presented with a mysterious box which carries a distress signal. Believing it to be from a fellow Time Lord, the cosmic nomad whisks himself and his companions outside the boundaries of the universe and on what should be a rescue mission. But what everyone finds is a dark junkyard planet populated by the bizarre auntie, uncle and nephew. Last and not least, among the strange inhabitants is a mentally unstable woman that goes by the name of Idris. This episode we see the Doctor and his companions receive a distress signal from his old friend Drax, and they go to a junkyard planet in a pocket universe. There, the TARDIS soul is taken and put into a woman called Idris, played by Joanna Lumley. The TARDIS team would be split into 3. Zenla and Gemma would be trapped in the TARDIS as it's taken over by an entity called House, voiced by Michael Sheen, and a strange psychological mind games are playing. Chris initially sticks with the Doctor, but he ends up with Auntie and Uncle, the 2 residents of the planets, as he learns about the past Time Lords who have been here and helps them die peacefully. Finally, the Doctor and Idris try to save Zenla and Gemma by building a TARDIS on the junkyard to chase after them. Here we'd have a wonderful, funny and emotional interplay between the Doctor and Idris as they both get to speak to each other properly for the first time. In the TARDIS corridors, Idris sends a message to Zenla and Gemma telling them to head to the secondary control room to turn off the shields so they can get their junkyard TARDIS inside. Eventually, Zenler and Gemma find a way into the fantastic recreation of the Season 14 secondary console room, and the Doctor and Idris land. They have a face-off with House, and the Doctor asks the secondary control room to be deleted. House obliged, and 4 of them are automatically relocated to the main control room. However, as Idris is dying, her soul is let back into the TARDIS, and she takes over, killing House. After that, they go back to the planet and get Chris back. The Doctor would feel deeply affected by the meeting the TARDIS in person, and we see him break down into tears and cry as she dies. Lanewood, a small town in the Wild West, full of many different types of people, some just trying to make a living and others outlaws. However, when the old sheriff dies, a new one steps into place. No one knows much about the new sheriff, except for the fact he's a doctor with no name. This episode will be a western, the first one since the gunfighters in the Cartmel era, and the episode is pretty much the same deal, except it's a lot more historically accurate. It's just a bit of a fun run around, which even features Linda Barron and the Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon back too. The real world character Jesse James would feature as the main villain. Every night, after 10 PM, a man appears at the end of the street, and every night someone on the street is in danger of being assassinated with no information leaking out. Anyone who moves to a new house is still a potential victim. Anyone who dies, the next of kin becomes a victim. It looks like there's no way out, and perhaps no way of finding the only person he wants. This episode will be a dark, gruesome horror story which will see the Doctor, Zenler, Chris and Gemma intertwined in a supernatural murderer who's obsessed with killing everyone living on just one street, and especially someone in particular, Chris. It turns out that the killer is in fact a lot closer to Chris than anyone expected, because he was in fact his dad, played by Daniel Hill, who the Doctor thinks was kidnapped while the Valiant and experimented upon, turning him into the killer that he is. Chris is confronted with him, and Chris actually has to kill him himself to save everyone else. The Doctor, Zenler, Chris and Gemma land on the space station Nerva, except at the earliest point the Doctor's visited. The station is manned, armed and brand new, and controlled by the fascist Earth government known as the Guines. The Doctor and his companions are immediately arrested and taken to the prison quarters. Something must be done. This is humanity at its worst. The Doctor smells a rebellion in the making. This story be set in humanity's future in the year 3297, one of the darkest times in Earth's history, during the time when the Guines, a fascist political party, controlled Earth's government. The Doctor, Zenler, Chris and Gemma arrive from the newly built space station Nerva, and they are immediately arrested for trespassing. As it turns out, Nerva was one of the key headquarters of the Guines, and it contained a prison facility home to 450 prisoners, now 454. We spend 40 minutes in this prison. The Doctor and his companions are horrified by what they see. Everything there is without hope, battered down and essentially dead inside. They don't understand why. Everyone is so unresponsive, and then it happens to them. They're put in their cells, and the guards have one-on-one sessions with all of them, and they psychologically torture them, making them feel more pain and hurt in a couple of hours of psychological torture than even weeks of conventional torture. Afterwards, the Doctor, Zenler, Chris and Gemma feel the same as the others, almost dead. However, meanwhile, we focus on the chief scientist on the station, Dr. Armstrong, who is trying to work out how the TARDIS works, even what it is. He asks the Doctor to be moved to his facility, under his observation, as he needs to crack down the TARDIS conundrum and find out what on earth it is. The Doctor is released, and is just as unresponsive as he was before. Dr. Armstrong can't understand why, as he's seen the CCTV tapes of when they arrived, and the Doctor was totally different. The Doctor tells him what they do in the prison, and Dr. Armstrong's horrified. However, he passes that off as just some rogue guards in the prison acting a bit brutal and nothing to do with the Guine regime, contrary to what the Doctor says, as he's indoctrinated into believing the Guines are amazing. The Doctor opens the TARDIS doors and lets him in. He's beyond shocked and can't believe what he's seeing. The Doctor sits him down and shows him the records of the Guine Empire. Dr. Armstrong has trouble believing him, but he knows deep down it's true. He breaks down, as his life has been torn apart and everything he knows false. The Doctor then asks Dr. Armstrong to help him, free everyone here and help them get to safety. Dr. Armstrong feels he needs to do some good and agrees. Over the next 20 minutes, the Doctor and Dr. Armstrong free the prisoners and they take control of the station. holding the guards and the staff from the station hostage in the prison facility. However, the guards are notified of this and a ship is sent to investigate. The guards stormtroopers enter the station and a battle ensues between the prisoners and the guards. The prisoners eventually win, but not before Gemma is kidnapped by the guards and taken back to Earth. On Earth, Gemma sees the dystopian nightmare of what the planet has become, ruin and reckoning, with a glaze of propaganda over the whole thing. Everywhere, there's a picture or a video of a woman, the leader of the Gaian Empire, Veronica Latimer. Back on the station, the Dr. Zenler, Chris and Dr. Armstrong, as well as the prisoners, are preparing a rebellion to take down the Gaian Empire once and for all. Back on Earth, Gemma is taken to a beautiful country estate, perhaps the only beautiful place left on Earth. She's taken to a cozy sitting room and told to wait, and in enters Veronica Latimer. Latimer tells Gemma that she knows she's from the future and will now do everything she can to help the Gaian Empire survive with future knowledge. Back on Nerva, they receive a transmission from Earth. It's Latimer. She holds up Gemma and tells them that unless they surrender, she will die. The Doctor says no, and that he's coming to get her, and he will take down the Gaian Empire once and for all. And then the episode ends on that cliffhanger. As the guys move to attack the Nerva beacon, the Doctor finds himself in a hopeless situation. One by one, his band of rebels are being picked apart and taken out. Gaian supremacy always triumphs, and this time is looking no different. Fighting to the last man, the prisoners of the beacon are determined to take them down. However, the Doctor begins to question whether he has the right to interfere in such an important historical moment. This episode kicks off, well, firstly with a previous segment, but then, after that, this episode kicks off with an action-packed rescue scene where the Doctor, along with Chris and Zenler, rescue Gemma from Veronica Latimer's estate. This rescue scene lasts about a third of the runtime, approximately 25 to 30 minutes, and it recreates the type of scale of action reached in the Redstone finales, something not managed since. After this is over, the Doctor and his companions return to Nerva and prepare for a battle to the death. Latimer sends out the whole Gaian fleet to Nerva, and they have about 20 minutes to prepare. The next Thursday episode focuses on the preparation for the Battle of Nerva, as well as the prisoners keeping the hostages. Dr. Armstrong is insistent that they should all stay as hostages and they shouldn't be harmed, because if they do, then they would just provoke the Gaians further. He and many of the other prisoners work in shifts guarding them, and they continue throughout the final 30 minutes, where we get pretty much a real-time battle interclub with the Doctor and Gemma making their way to the planet and releasing footage of the Gaians' treatment of the prisoners of Nerva, sparking a revolution on Earth. By the end of the episode, the Gaians are defeated and Latimer is put behind bars. Gemma decides to stay on Earth and help with the rebuilding of the planet. The Doctor, Zenler and Chris reluctantly say goodbye and they leave in the TARDIS. The episode then ends with the Doctor, Chris and Zenler in the TARDIS and they get a distress call. They smile and say, "This'll be fun." And with that, the episode ends. Like with season 43 and 46, following the episode, a short teaser trailer for Doctor Who Endgame would have played.
May the light of your soul guide you. May you see in what you do the beauty of your own soul.
Do not let them trouble you.
May it release within you well springs of refreshment, inspiration, and excitement.
Soon as possible, yes. Knock on wood, do what I can. I don't care.
May the sacredness of your work bring healing, light, and renewal to those who work with you.
As this two-parter would have been 3 hours in total, it would have actually come to about half an hour longer than Doctor Who Endgame. This was so, while Endgame could be seen as David Suchet's finale, this story could be seen as the finale of Doctor Who Chapter 3 on television. For more on chapter details, click the link. So, I hope you enjoyed this season. Sorry for the long wait. Next time we'll be seeing David Suchet's final story, Doctor Who Endgame. Until then, goodbye.